Welcome to A Game of Ice and Fire, a video series devoted to A Song of Ice and Fire wargame by Cool Mini or Not. We cover all aspects of the hobby with tactics and list build videos, painting tutorials of varying levels, and battle reports. Now before I get started, I wanted to throw this ad at the beginning of the video just to try and catch more people, but Big Top Gaming, the umbrella for the Game of Ice and Fire channel, has started a Facebook page, and I mostly post painting updates, a few random thoughts here and there, along with some Song of Ice and Fire garbage memes. So if you want to interact with us a little bit more, see some more stuff that we're posting, or put any requests in, you can do so there by just searching for us on Facebook and giving us a like. In this video, we'll be going over the Revengeance battle of Greatjon Umber into the Night's Watch. The list hasn't changed from the last time I played it. I'm still rocking one NCU. Greatjon's taking the helm with the Sworn Swords, and then I've got the double Berserkers, both with Sworn Sword captains. Then the Great Axes running around with Brandon Hodor, and then I have a vanilla Sworn Sword unit, and then Summer to round out the list. For the Night's Watch army today, my opponent decided to also try running only one NCU to just try and fit some of the new things that they had picked up, namely the Ranger Hunters. Otherwise, they're running Jon Snow as the commander that sits with the veterans. Ghost in there, of course, along with the Ranger Trackers, 2 units of Sworn Brothers, only one with a Watch Captain, and then the Ranger Hunters that I mentioned. We decided to keep with the Game of Thrones scenario. I was trying to alter as little as possible to get a feel for this list again. The first time I put it on the table, things just weren't clicking quite the way I wanted them to, so we're sticking with a lot of the same things we had, even though my opponents changed their armies for a little bit. For the objectives, the one at the lower part of the screen that it looks like Summer's on right now ended up rolling up as the one where you claim 2 victory points when you score it, and then you take a panic test. The one that's closest to the veterans, the next one up from the bottom of the screen, was restoring D3 wounds to a unit. Then the one in the very middle of the table was choosing an NCU, and that NCU loses all abilities as long as you hold it. And then the one opposite the Ranger Hunters, or closer to Ranger Hunters, that one was the objective that causes the attachment to lose all their abilities. And then the very last one was the Sundering and Vicious objective. And for deployment, for the Greatjon side, at the top we've got the Berserkers with the Sword Captain. Then Greatjon came in with his Sworn Swords underneath them. Great Axes are holding up the middle because I feel like that's the best place for them in terms of just trying to get into the mix as soon as possible. Plus the Palisade that's directly across from them makes it so that my opponent gets to feel a little bit of the same slowness that that unit gets to feel, and that they won't be able to engage with them as quickly as they are able to. It could bite me a little bit in the end that they can't get to where they want to, but the Stark's Tactics deck has some answers for that. After them, the Berserkers with the other Berserker unit came down, and then the Sworn Swords that are just vanilla shore up the back. And when I saw that the bottom objective had rolled up as, or flipped over as the score 2 objective, or score 2 points, and then take a panic test, Summer, that's basically where I want Summer to be. Just, it's a perfect scoring piece for that particular objective. For the Night's Watch, starting at the top, the Sworn Brothers went down with Ghost behind them, followed by the Ranger Hunters. Then the Watch Captain Sworn Brother unit came down, and they ended up getting the Watcher on the Wall as their vow. And then the veterans with Jon Snow, followed by the ranger trackers at the very bottom here. So a couple notes at the beginning here. First of all, the computer wasn't recording things properly, so we got a little bit further ahead of ourselves, and I had to start, but we only got 2 activations ahead. It's not a huge deal. It was Master Aemon going on the maneuver to move up the topmost Sworn Brothers, and then Summer taking the objective, where you can score 2 points and take a panic test. The other thing I want to call out is it is a very windy day in Wisconsin, so my filter might alter the way my voice is sounding, because it's also going to be trying to denoise the wind that's basically trying to push my house apart. So I apologize for that in advance, but what can you do in Wisconsin weather and limited technologies? So I know that there's going to be an engagement happening at the top of the board with those Sworn Brothers coming into the Berserkers. I did try to position them to where a charge would be hard to get for my opponent, so he's not tempted to try and take that early on in the next turn, so I can avoid activating the Berserkers early, since they're a little bit on the safe side. Now that's not completely true, because you've got tactics cards to worry about, and NCUs that can mess up your plans, but in general I think that you can, if you can dodge your opponent's threat ranges just a little bit, you can keep your units a little bit on the safe side, or just prolong their existence on the table. So the Berserkers are running up the middle, or marching up the middle, along with the veterans that have Jon Snow. Now Summer, but Ghost is getting that in tandem activation as well, their maneuver. So I may have to make a choice here on where I want everything to end up. The Palisade is the only piece of terrain that's really stopping me from being able to control my movements completely, so I get the great axes up just to make sure they don't get chunked up on anything. I think it's important to make sure that they go towards the widest openings they possibly can, which is kind of why I have we did the normal deployment for terrain, and I put down the hedge that just got removed, which we put back on the table, because in this game we decided to play with the linear obstacles only counting for the actual picture of the obstacle that's on there, instead of the whole piece including grass. So I'd be curious to see how everyone else plays with that rule. Just seems like it's a hangover for me from War Machine, and it made sense. So that's what I'm going with this game. But next up, the Sworn Swords are coming up, and as I was saying earlier, I'm sorry I got sidetracked, but I put down the hedge in the Weirdwood, and then my opponent put the 2 Palisades down on each side. The Palisades are nasty in that they do limit a lot of your movement in this game, but you have to maneuver around them too. And since my opponent's opted to go for a list build that is similar to mine in that it has more business instead of NCU control, the Palisades get a little bit on the frustrating side to deal with. So on that top part of the screen, I'm looking at Greatjon's unit right now, and I want to make sure that the Berserkers don't get completely tar-pitted into the Sworn Brothers that are on the top of the screen, so they're just positioning to get in on the Sworn Brothers if the Berserkers fall in, if I can get it with it. Next up, I put Catman on the tactics slot, and I think that this portion of the tactics board is really important to making sure you have a decent game. It depends a little bit on your list build. Like if you're building your list to essentially ignore some of the synergies with your tactics cards, it's not so important, or it still could be because you're making sure your opponent doesn't get it. But since my list is built heavily around trying to support the tactics cards and get the most out of them, drawing more tactics cards for me is going to help lead me to winning a game that I might not win, or winning a game I've got under control earlier than what I normally would. So I'm sitting on a fistful of 5 cards right now, and that makes me feel pretty comfortable in terms of the shenanigans that I can work with here. So My first thing I believe is we're looking at the panic test for or morale test for Summer, and Summer blasted out of the water with boxcars, so that objective isn't going anywhere in terms of Summer's control, I guess. So I'm just trying to do some pre-measuring here to figure out what is going to be the best play to get these Sworn Swords up a little bit further. And I do decide to take the maneuver position from my opponent to move up the Stark Sworn Swords, just so they can get a better chance of charging into the Ranger Hunters. It's not that unit is extremely threatening to this list. It's more so that they're very fast, and in Game of Thrones I'm starting to recognize that speedy units can be very beneficial in terms of getting to the objectives that are more important for you. Things like shutting down an NCU or grabbing the extra victory points if you're falling behind on your opponent. So taking out the horses as early as possible is something that I'm very interested in to try and limit my opponent's mobility. So the Sworn Swords then are just getting up on that objective to try and control it. And I believe that this was a tactics card that got played to get them up there. But I'm not certain on that. I think I missed it while I was busy chit-chatting about the Game of Thrones strategy mindset. So they must have gotten extra activation, because this is the first devastating blow of the game, in that the Night's Watch failed their charge, so they stopped just outside of the Berserkers. And now I forgot to influence Catelyn's Sworn Sword unit. I think that since I had forgotten to do it, I decided to throw it down on the Sworn Swords, but I should have kicked that over to a Berserker unit. I was not shocked, but I was surprised that I forgot to put the influence token down, and if I had my druthers, I would have put it on the Berserkers instead, because that's where the benefits come from. So here I end up playing Devastating Impact. So I do only... This was the whole reason why I set this up, I guess, was just to get the Sworn Swords into combat with those Rangers early. They get their +2 dice to the attack roll, or +2 hits, and then they also pop Stark Fury this turn. So out of that die roll, it looks like my opponent's going to be taking, what is it, 9 saves or something like that. Tons of damage coming at them. They end up rolling horribly on their dice, and they lose 9 wounds out of that. So I don't think they saved this anymore. Either that or it was like 10 wounds or something. It was a ridiculous amount. Like, those guys just like came out of nowhere. And Stark Fury did not. Yeah, Stark Fury did happen. I forgot. Just a little jumbled here. This game did happen a little while ago, and I was holding out to get my opponent to commentate with me on this one. But as I had said earlier, Wisconsin weather has been moody and horrible. So trying to get them to come out here to record where I've got all my equipment, it has been a little bit of a task. So I just decided to do this one solo, and hopefully the next one that we get in, we get 2 people working on this guy. So I think there was a tactics card that got played from the Night's Watch player, but the trigger that had caused it to happen was passing a morale test or something like that, and they didn't pass a morale test on the Rangers. Yeah, that was what it was. He was trying to get them to restore some wounds, but they failed their morale test. So now they're getting a retreat order. just to get out of dodge and not lose a unit right away. Losing a unit like that early would be pretty terrible, especially since we realized about halfway through the game that victory points through combat are something that are alive on Game of Thrones. Now, I had thought that when I first read it, I came with some biases that I had from other games, and that all of the rules for the scenario would be on the scenario. But it looks like there's the overarching rule that every scenario has victory through combat. There's just the exceptions that don't, and they'll call that out then. So that was just something that I had to adjust to. The Berserkers do charge the Sworn Brothers up at the top here, but they also fail their, or not fail their charge, they just have a disorderly charge, so they don't get to re-roll their dice. But it's another 4 saves on the Sworn Swords. In addition to that, though, we are getting, I think it's Lash Out played on them. No, it's not Lash Out. It must be Berserker Tactics or something. Yeah, it looks like it's Berserker Tactics, so I get to do another 3 wounds to them and lose 3 wounds myself. So even though they didn't do super hot on their attack dice roll, we still take out 7 or 6. I think it's either 7 or 6 Sworn Brothers, which is a good one to. So far, we're sitting pretty. I think at least this list in particular, since Maester Aemon is the only one providing the healing and there's no Craster, spreading these wounds out in massive amounts between these units is really helping me out a lot. My opponent has to then try and figure out which unit he's going to bring back, so to speak. So now we're getting Maester Aemon healing up the Sworn Brothers, which I expected. I don't think the Ranger Hunters are really that important in this game, at least to my opponent. I feel very threatened by them just because of how much space they can make up by grabbing late game objectives that I might have gotten cleared off of, or that we fought over and couldn't clear. I guess maybe the summer objectives that I'm worried about with them. So the Greatjon rolls a 6 to get in. They're perfect with their charge. They're on that palisade terrain, but it's just the green part that they're on, not the actual menacing part. I think I was hemming and hawing over here about whether I wanted to use Umber's ability or Stark Fury. I think I ended up opting for Stark Fury just because I didn't value, or well, not that I didn't value, but I think the unit was already vulnerable for whatever reason. No, they weren't vulnerable. It's just that I valued the better attacks from the Stark Sworn Swords than I did the vulnerable panic on the Sworn Brothers. So Stark Fury. Oh no, maybe I didn't. Not certain on what I did there. I must have not popped any of their abilities to get that to happen. So we are unfortunately accepting a charge from the veterans on the flank of the Sworn Swords. Now I think I had missed something semi-important here when it came to pivoting them after the retreat, but I'm not fresh enough on the disengagement rules for the game to know if they were able to pivot after the horses ran away from them. So we end up losing a lot more from that charge too. Like, getting hit on the side is really harsh, but we still have at least 1 full rank on there, which a full rank doesn't matter, but we've got more dudes. Unfortunately, more dudes turn into less dudes because we also failed on Mind Test. So I think this is the sudden charge tactic or swift advance. Yeah, I think this is swift advance, where I get to move the Berserkers up as a free maneuver, pivot them, and now I get to charge the veterans. And I really like, this is really slick because they ended up getting the side of the Sworn Swords, but I ended up getting the rear flank, or the rear arc, or whatever you want to call it, on the veterans. So this is where having Catelyn's influence on the Berserker list, or Berserker unit, would have been really great on either unit, really. Like, I didn't expect that the middle Berserker unit would be able to get the rear flank on these guys, or the rear arc on these guys for their base, but it was at least the other Berserkers got great influence. I'm beyond it. Yes. At any rate, the penalty for being in the rear arc is like -2 to your saves, and then -2 to your panic test. And the Berserkers also have Sundering, so the veterans are going down to a 6+ armor save or defense save, and we had to look at the rules a little bit, and we couldn't find anything that said it. They don't, but the veterans seem like they can get their counterattack while they're getting fought in the rear arc, but they don't roll a single save, and 8 bodies come off of that unit from the rear arc charge from the Berserkers. Another really devastating blow. So my opponent's got 2 units that are hurting pretty hard, but they also have they still have pretty decent presence in terms of objectives. Like the veterans have 1 objective, and then the Sworn Brothers are blocking off access to the other one, and I don't have a unit that's maneuverable enough to get up there and grab it before they can. The big saving grace for me in all of this is that Summer is holding the bottom objective, cracking points really crazy. It's a nice balancing mechanic. It looks like a tactics card came down for my opponent to heal back some of the horses, and some wounds. And then the Berserkers are taking a side charge, flank charge from the Sworn Brothers with the Night's Watch Captain. I'm not too worried about taking wounds with these guys. The more I take, the better they get. So I'm not worried about it. They might die quicker, but at least they'll be able to get some additional efficacy out of the way their attack rules work. But I do take 7 wounds there, and that does sting just a little bit. The thing that makes it worse is that 1 guy's left in that second rank, so I'm not getting the full 10 dice out of the Berserkers, which is a bit of a bummer. So I have to do some soul searching on this activation. I end up playing can't remember what card it is, the one that lets you get a free maneuver with a unit. I think it was that I just had 2 swift advances in my hand, and I was checking to see if charging the Sworn Brother unit was something that could happen, and it could happen, but it wasn't something that was very likely to happen. So I instead ended up putting a free maneuver on the Great Axes, and then just marching them to claim the objective, because that objective, if you remember, is the one that shuts off an NCU, and with my opponent only having 1 NCU now, I get to shut off Maester Aemon's innate healing ability, and I think that really cripples a lot of the comeback potential for the Night's Watch player. So I felt that was a more beneficial use of that card than trying to get a charge, and he had a couple chances. I think it was like I needed to roll a 5 or something, and I didn't want to take the risk on it. So I accept a charge from the Cranigman, or not Cranigman. I've got Cranigman on the line because Rob starts my next list, and these are the Ranger Hunters, Ranger Trackers, small Rangers. I did hand my opponent the skin-changing card for Bran to let him know that he'll have 2 less attack dice, and that they suffer disorderly. So there's not a whole lot that these guys end up doing to those Great Axes. They do. It's more so the Great Axes hurt themselves more so than the Trackers did. They didn't roll a single save out of the 4 that my opponent landed, which is unfortunate, but what can you do? Then they yo-yo back to get back on their objective, which is a good use of them. I think that they're a very nuanced unit. I don't know if they're worth 8 points good. They probably could be a little bit cheaper, but they definitely have some use. Yeah, I don't know if they're 8 points. I don't like taking a low save unit that's more than 6. Except for Berserkers, I guess. Like, Berserkers are a really big exception to the rule. And it's not a rule, it's just a thing. Ghost comes up and grabs the objective, so now I've got to cleave through the Sworn Brothers in order to get that one. And it's a bit of a bummer, but what can you do? Another tactics card puts another horse on the unit with 1 move left, so they get that sweet second rank bonus, but not by much. So I was checking to see if I needed to discard any tactics cards, and I think I've got the things I have in my hand I'm enjoying, so I think I get to draw 1 here based on how many cards I played last turn, and pretty hopeful with the way my hand is looking. The tactics cards of this game just are so fun. It's another cool thing to the game that I adore. These top of the rounds are always difficult to work through. You have to take this game turn by turn or activation by activation. It's so the alternate activation is so unique in that you just are constantly having to evolve your plan on what's going on. So if you can think on your feet, I think you'll be really well served tactically in this game, as opposed to other ones where it's activate all your models and then your opponent goes. It becomes less of a singular puzzle and just always an evolving puzzle. It's really cool. It's just a neat element to the game that I appreciate. So Great Axes end up getting charged again by the Kranigmen. God damn it. The Ranger Trackers. And I decide to respond with what is it? Jeez, I don't even it had to have been Lash Out or something. But yeah, it must have been Lash Out, so that I take the hits from the trackers, and then they take 3 wounds. So I just taking some bodies off of that, so that my opponent's a little bit more cautious about what he does with those rangers, because they're starting to take casualties, and I don't know if they're worth healing up right now. So at least I'm trying to keep that unit honest. So these are the Berserkers going, and they're going to try and wipe out the veteran unit. We still are getting all those bonuses for me, negatives for my opponents for being in the rear. So they got to take 7 saves at a 6+, and they don't need that. So I had to kick my victory points up again. I think that brings me to 3 points total right now, and my opponent has 2 since none of my units have died yet. And they only had the 2 objectives previously. At that point, I was looking at seeing what the the Sworn Swords could do based on the unit being killed since they were engaged with them. And I decided that I was spending a little bit too long looking for it, so I decided to move past it. And I probably could have pivoted them just to make sure that they were in a little bit better of a position, so they wouldn't be accepting rear charges later, because those Berserkers are definitely not going to last very long. 5+ save, and they were engaged on the flank, so things are not going to be great for them in the future, just based on their stats. So it looks like the Rangers are shifting and then shooting, which they do horribly. They only land 2 shots, but reluctantly, those 2 shots kill 2 Sworn Swords, and 1 lone guy is left, which is good for me, at least, in that my opponent doesn't crack crank a point up on me early like that through the victory. Because right now I've got a 1 point lead, and I want to try and maintain that lead throughout this game, and like that's what I want to do all the time, anyways. But Catelyn gets on the tactics slot for the tactics board, and influences the unit, or the Sworn Sword unit with one dude left in it. End up drawing cards, and pretty happy with what I'm pulling here. Again, my list synergizes so well with my tactics deck that getting these cards is super great for me. I just want that spot more so than ever. And now I know that the spots are fluid, like they change, that your desire to get them changes as the game goes on in terms of like whether you want to trigger certain cards or not. But right there, I just wanted to try and draw more cards. The Stark Tactics deck works better with some of the maneuver, or not, but with the maneuver spot, they end up working a little bit better. But just getting to the extra cards gives me more options. Because Greatjon's commander cards, he doesn't care where you're at on the tactics board. He just does damage. He more cares about what's going on the table. So I think we're just having some troubles figuring out what to do here. Not troubles, really. I think it was just a prolonged activation to finish up those messengers or do whatever was not with them. I can't remember exactly. I think right now I believe I'm activating the Greatjon's unit just to try and kill the Sworn Brothers to open up a charge lane to Ghost so that the Berserkers could go in and then clear off that objective. So it would be a 3-point play up there, because I get 1 for killing the Sworn Brothers, 1 for killing Ghost, and then 1 for claiming that objective. It would have been a killer, awesome play, but Greatjon's unit just did not pay out there. That just didn't happen for them, which is, it's okay, it happens, but it would have been a really neat play. I think with that play, you almost get up so far to where your opponent can't. Your opponent really will have this hard time coming back. So it would have been a big shift in the game, but just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it's just the game's over. It's just a cool play that could have happened. And the Berserkers go down like I expected them to. They're not a very survivable unit, and I really wished I would have liked to have gotten to the Last Stand card for Greatjon Umber, but unfortunately I just didn't pull it. So now my opponent is up another point as well. And this is like my shining moment in this game. I get to put Northern Ferocity on a Catelyn Influence Sworn Sword unit, and they're getting all the buffs for Northern Ferocity. They whiffed the initial charge, and then the rerolls were horrible, absolutely horrible. And I think that on this one I opted out of Stark Fury. I don't know if that was. I think at the time I was thinking that if I procced Stark Fury, that I wouldn't. That I would just lose the unit. And like an idiot, I did not read the rest of the card and realize that if you only have 1 wound left in that unit, you don't take the rest of the wounds. So I think that could have gone a little bit better had I done that, because they get +1 to hit at that point and then critical blow. So there definitely were some 3s that would have hit on that one, and I probably would have gotten close to taking out that horse unit. But what can you do? Read your cards. PSA from Perk. So now the Sworn Brothers look like they just had activated to try and get some damage in before they were killed. I think this might have been just a mix-up on activations for me. I should have waited for the Stark Sworn Sword unit and activated the Berserker unit first, just to make sure that I was maximizing the activation economy, because the Rangers and everything else that's over there on the Sworn Sword side, or the single Sworn Sword side, that's already activated, so there's no other threat over there. But with the Sworn Swords being almost dead, I could have taken that activation from my opponent and kept myself pretty healthy in Greatjon's unit in terms of saving some bodies. So it was a very nuanced misplay on my part, but definitely something for others to think about. Now, on this play, I rolled my attacks on the Berserkers, and I hit 4 times with no rerolls or anything because they're engaged. Now I could have just taken my chances on the 4 saves of him failing 3, but I opted not to do that and played Berserker Tactics instead to take the 3 wounds and do 3 automatic wounds to my opponent, just to make sure that the unit was dead and I didn't have to worry about chancing the dice and losing another activation to those Sworn Brothers staying in play. And Ghost ended up rolling double ones to hit at first, but then re-rolled them. It was just a fun moment to celebrate. Great Axes make their charge on the full unit of Sworn Brothers, and they opt for Mighty Cleave on this one. It's a great attack. Executioners is good when you're going into big loom units like Cavalry, Flatemen, or Casterly Knights, or whatever. Knights of Casterly Rock. You can see I kind of forcefully threw the card at my opponent, but that was more of like a style throw than an angry throw, because he was questioning what Mighty Cleave did, so I just gave him the card so he could read it and believe it in his own eyes, or whatever. See it for his own eyes. So my opponent fails 5 saves initially, and then fails 3 more. So there's 8 bodies, or 7 bodies, I guess. I miscalculated the saves, but 7 bodies come out of that unit. It was pretty harsh. A good attack from an awesome unit. Great Axes are so fun. So here we did some calculations, and based on I think at this point we're tied at 9-9. So with my opponent activating first, things are looking a little dodgy. But he does restore some wounds to the veterans, and then we do miss the calculation on the points. I killed the unit of Sworn Brothers but didn't account for it, so I actually at that point went to 10 points before the turn was over. So Stark won the game 10. Really close game, but it almost, I guess it looked like it on the table. There was a lot of exchange going back and forth, but the game was very, very close. Well, I hope you enjoyed this battle report. It was a really close game between Night's Watch and Starks. Could have gone either way at the end there. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to be notified when I post new stuff, you can click the bell icon, and YouTube will let you know when I put something new out there. Otherwise, I did the Facebook spiel at the beginning of this. So until next time, I hope you enjoy the games you're playing, and I look forward to making the next battle.